Welcome to my messy office. Sometimes we have to just work where we can find the space. I feel like this morning, as I've worked with my guides and teachers, they often just give me a word to focus on for a lecture. And the word they gave me in my sleep as I was waking up was education. And the quote I want to share with you is that education makes us aware of our own changes in attitude and our growth in comprehension. You know, when we were born into this world, our parents wanted us to have the best education we could have. And that is the case with most people, not all, but most people. And I feel like that when I look back over my life history and the education that I've been able to glean from this world, it has given me an insight into who I am, as well as who the people around me are. Now, we started way back, in elementary school, and we learned our basics. And as we got older and went to high school and on to the college level, it helped us to learn about the things that are important in the world today, in the world in our history. And for some reason, I just seem to be focused on the fact that education is historical. You know, it has been said that if we do not uh, know our history, we are doomed to repeat it. I don't want to go through all that again. I don't want to go through World War One and World War II, however we feel like we might be at this point. But we find that as we totally understand what we have studied, it brings us into a comprehension of who we are. And when I found the Spiritualist church, I found who I was in relation to the God energy. And that, for some reason, I needed to know how I got there. And so I went into the history of spiritualism to find out exactly what had brought that to my attention and why I was so interested in it. We find sometimes that as we study the, I encourage all of you, there's a little book called Hydesville in History, and I encourage all of you to have read that because it gives you the history of our church and our religion. It gives you the history of how the Fox sisters and Charles Rosna interacted, because that's how we're interacting today with the spirit world. And as we know and understand that concept, then we can learn a great deal more. And I feel like sometimes when we are reciting our principles, we're just reciting words. We're not reciting the feelings that go along with them. And when we look at those principles, we say, okay, everything that is a part of God. And so I'm a part of God. Isn't that amazing? And then we find out as we study that all the people in the historical stories realized that they were also connected to that infinite intelligence, to that God energy. And so as we realize that, then we know that we don't just go to church on Sunday and listen to a lecture and then go home and forget it. We learn and we take it with us, and it helps us to be aware of what's going on around us and what we have learned up to that point. Now, I know a lot of you probably know me and know me well enough to know that I've been a teacher all of my life. Now, it started when I was a kid. Okay. And I would go in the kitchen and start baking a cake because my mother was working and it was just the two of us left. My father and brother were both in spirit. And so the kids around me in the neighborhood, because I grew up in Broad Creek Village where there was a lot of kids, and the kids around me would come to my house and watch me bake this cake because they were learning how to do that too. So we have been teachers in our way nearly all of our lives by what we do and what we practice. And it went on in through school. I mean, I've always had at least two jobs. Work hard, okay? And I feel like that When I became an instructor for the Tidewater Community College, I was teaching subjects that I knew about, which were business and finance and English language and things of that kind. And I taught evening classes with adults for 20 years for the Tidewater Community College. And all of this time I was still a banker, a professional banker. and and we find out that as we go into our focused career in our life, that we learn a great deal, and that's part of our education in the world. And we can combine those things. We can combine what we are teaching others along with what we're learning for ourselves. Isn't that a fabulous concept, that we're combining these things? As we become teachers for others, we become teachers for ourselves as well, because we're learning along with them. Now, I recommended Hydesville in History as a little book, but there's also a book called Rock of Truth. And if you have read Rock of Truth, you get the history, you get the current concepts with spiritualism, because if we are a spiritualist, we need to know what a spiritualist really is, you know? And so in that fashion, as we study the Rock of Truth, we find out that spiritualists are people who live it every day. We're not people who just take it up once in a while. We're spiritualists because we live it every day. We live what we believe. And as we go through the principles and we agree with them, then it's an education for us how we feel, how we react, how we are one with some of these concepts. And as we feel this and this connection with spiritualism, then we find out that we're learning, aren't we? We're learning, and the education that we are accepting into our life, it's about learning the philosophy. My notes, okay, little small piece of paper. We are learning the philosophy of spiritualism and how we apply it to our lives, so that we are aware of our changes in attitudes, and our awareness of our comprehension of life in the world today. Now, in our world today, we need a lot of that comprehension, because we're going through a lot of what people are struggling with. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a lot of us to have struggles that we probably would not have had without this kind of medical emergency. And so as we come to the comprehension of how we act and react, every time I turn on the news and they tell me how many people have passed the spirit from this disease, over 400,000 in the United States, all of those people, every night in my little chat with God, okay, that we call our prayers, I ask that they understand, those who have passed the spirit, that they know the peace of spirit, because those of us who have drifted out into that vibration, into that world, know and understand that it's the most peaceful place we could ever be. And so as we see our loved ones in that environment, we know that they're experiencing the peace that comes to those who understand the transition. And I feel like as I accept those that I love who come in around me, I walk into the house and I say, "Hi, ghosties," because I know that they live with me, okay? And I have a lot of spirit friends who come in. But as we know and understand that they can communicate with us, they can be with us, they can help us when we ask for the help. Sometimes, and I was noticing when I was looking at the gallery pictures, some of you are doing this, what happens when spirit comes in around us? They affect our nose. They make my nose tingle. And I know that happens to other people. And so we realize the interaction with that spirit realm and that rate of vibration that takes us a little higher than we are. It takes us higher than this physical realm that we live in. So when we find that we understand that comprehension, and that they can communicate with us from that realm just as easily as they could if they were standing in front of me, then I feel like that I have learned a great deal. And that education of knowing the communication with the spirit realm is one that has helped me, and I know it helps all of you, in that we understand that as they communicate with us, they're helping us learn. They're helping us to be at one with the life that we are living now. My life, when I look around me, I think, okay, I'm a loner and I live alone and I don't mind staying at home. But there are a lot of people who are encouraged to stay at home because of the pandemic, but they're not comfortable with it. And so as they go out and they mix and they communicate with other people, they have to remember to wear that mask. And I thought, should I put on a mask this morning? Well, no, there's no one around me. So if you saw me during the day somewhere else, you would see a mask. And so when we find that we are actually understanding these rules that they're giving us, that's an education to us in how we act and how we observe and how we accept the changes that are around us in our world. In my little notes, I had written down that the history as children is something that we take with us as we grow and as we comprehend the changes in life. When we went from elementary school to high school, then there were great changes in our lives because there were changes in our bodies and changes in our attitudes. And so it helped us understand. Education is something that we accept in the world. Yes. And then we learned the philosophy of life, which helps us also understand those changes and that awareness, the comprehension of what being a spiritualist really is. It's a person who understands that religion is something that we live with every moment of every day. It's not something that we just adopt when we say a prayer. It is not something we just adopt when we go into our church. And, we've been out of our churches for so long. It's like we had to take that environment, that feeling with us. That is an education in itself, isn't it? As we take that wonderful feeling of having been in our church and how it felt, that spiritual quality of being together with other people of like mind. And that is one of the things that kept me at the church, the Memorial Spiritualist Church in Norfolk, which is my home church. But I have traveled probably to churches in most states of the United States. I have enjoyed it. I had uh, yearly visits to the Northeast. I have worked churches in Maine, in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, even in New Jersey. I've been there a couple times too. And we find that as we travel, and as I went to the West Coast, one of the things that we learn, the education of understanding spiritualism, is the differences in how people accept and treat it in the various places in the country. Because when you go to a camp, now when I said I've been to the Northeast, I've been to Cape Cod. Yes, I've been to camp there. But I've also been to the camp on the West Coast in Tacoma, Washington, you know? And so when we compare how the people are expressing themselves and being a part of spiritualism in all of these vast places. And when you go to the West Coast and you go into Washington State, then you're going to go down the coast, you're going to go down to Oregon, and you're going to go down into California, because there are quite a few churches in the state of California, and I've visited most of them. And as we have interacted with people of those areas, then we've learned new things. We've learned new ways to accept ourselves as spiritualists, and we've accepted new ways of accepting this wonderful religion in this world today. That education. When my doctor gave me that word as I was coming out of the sleep state one morning, I thought, what? Because sometimes we get things and we say, oh my, and what am I supposed to do with that? And so when I was making my little notes, like 6 sentences, when you're making those, they're impressing you. what you've learned, what you want to share, and what's a part of you. Yes, it's a part of us as we have learned it. I don't know about you, but I'm a spiritualist 24/7, and I accept the fact that spirit interacts with me 24/7, and there are times when I think, talk to me, give me insight, help me with this. You know, my dear friend Fred Brown, who was my best friend and my accompanist for 43 years, he's around a lot. And I talk to him. And you have people who come into you that way, and his partner Bob that I worked with after Fred passed for over 2 years, he also comes in and he gives me a sense of peace. That was one thing that I could get from Robert Anderson, was the fact that he accepted his who he was and where he was and what he had learned. Now, he was Roman Catholic through and through, and I learned a lot from him. It was educational to have that interaction with him for that 2 years, because I learned how he believed and what he wanted out of the next world as well as this one, and when we put the Crispies in his hand when he passed away, it was like, okay, that's what gives you comfort, but it gives me comfort to know that that's what you wanted, that that's what you really loved and carry with you, that understanding of your interaction with the God of your understanding. That's what all of us, we may have people in our lives who have totally different concepts of what their philosophy of life may be. And it doesn't carry into what ours may be. But that's all right. We can interact with them because we learn from each other. We learn from those who are around us. They teach us by example. We teach them by example. I did a lecture and for this Love of Spirit Church in Leroy, Illinois, on mentoring. And I thought, that's what this education thing is about. They're just carrying it another step further, that we have to understand that in life today, we are mentors by how we act and how we interact and how we believe. And now some of my favorite things are, I'm an examiner for the Morris Pratt course. And sometimes when I read the essays from the students, I'm just blown away because they have such wonderful understanding and comprehension of what they have learned in that lesson. And I learn from every single one I read. I learn from every single lesson that I grade. And this week I had 12 of them. We find out that as we have all of these interactions with people and what they're learning and their education, it broadens our concepts. It broadens our concepts and helps us to understand our interaction with God and our interaction with other people of like mind, other people who are spiritualists in the world today. And I think that there are a lot more than we know. If we were counting numbers, it might be a small number, but it's not a small number. There are people who believe in spirit who never have been in a spiritualist church, who have never even talked to a medium, but they know that there's an energy around them, and it's the God energy and it's spirit coming into them. How many people who have lost someone in a war? It might have been a son, it might have been a brother, it might have been a father, and they've lost him, and they felt that presence at the time of transition. Isn't it a marvelous concept that spirit can come into us at any time? I think that's wonderful. Someone who's lost someone they dearly love, a relative, and to feel their presence and to hear the door open and shut for no reason, and for the light to go on and off for no reason. It's all education and understanding the interaction with the spirit world. So we learn from each other every single day of our lives. We learn how other people have actually understood something that we live by every day. And when we see those people and we love it and we share it and we accept it, let me encourage you from the bottom of my heart, get as much education as you can, read every book you can, take what you have learned with you on a daily stride through life, and you will find that education is the key to being at one with your own God. These things I ask for you, and I pray for you daily. Thank you.